This program is rated PG and may contain mature subject matter. Viewer discretion is advised.
China, a land of inspiration and innovation.
China's role on the world stage is massive.
Just an extraordinary country that's made such a contribution to world history.
China has revolutionized what we eat, how we dress,
Silk is an incredible superpower fabric.
and even how we fight wars.
Gunpowder allowed nations to conquer other nations and change the nature of the battlefield itself.
Chinese innovators pushed the frontiers of the known world.
Without China, the great explorers of the past may never have set sail.
And then helped us explore an entirely new one.
Rocket technology begins with this original Chinese idea of rockets as entertainment.
Now, to discover the key role China has played in world history, we're about to launch an experiment. Over the next hour, we will remove key Chinese contributions to history, science, and medicine.
If China was erased, the world would look radically different. And this would be disastrous.
A world without China would be a hungry, ignorant place.
This is History Erased. The world without China. In the land of the dragon, everything is just a bit bigger. China boasts the world's largest population at almost 1.4 billion. One of the only structures visible from space, the Great Wall, and a dam so massive it actually slows the planet's orbit. A land of deep contradictions where ancient marvels and modern wonders exist side by side. For millennia, China has been a hotbed of innovation and invention.
China has been the fountainhead of some of the greatest technological breakthroughs in the history of humanity.
Today, China is a financial powerhouse on track to eclipse the US in the next decade as the world's largest economy. It's already the largest exporter on the planet.
Without China's contribution to the world, our economy would be nowhere near what it is today.
Each year, ships bound from China carry roughly 90% of the world's computers, 70% of all mobile phones, 40% of all textiles. It's enough cargo each year to fill about 93 million shipping containers.
Over the past 20 to 30 years, China has become a major manufacturing center. China became the factory of the world.
So much of the world as we know it today depends on China. If for some reason the Chinese economy just stopped and their factories stopped producing and they stopped exporting, it would be a global earthquake.
It's hard to conceive of a world without China's massive contributions. But over the next hour, we'll do just that. We're launching a thought experiment to discover just how important China has been to history. One by one, we'll remove key Chinese innovations in science, commerce, culture, and medicine. Their disappearance will have dire consequences for the planet and turn one routine crossing of the Atlantic into a struggle for survival. First, we'll set our sights on an invention that remade the world almost 2,000 years ago. One that many of us take for granted today, paper. But as we're about to see, we lose it at our own peril. While technology has reduced the amount we once used, we're a long way from a paperless world. In fact, each year, American businesses alone use over 12 trillion sheets. That's more than enough to cover the entire 500 million square kilometer surface of planet Earth. And if the rumors are true, every single one of them can be traced back to this little guy. According to legend, in the 104th year of the Common Era, history was made when Chinese inventor Cai Lun watched wasps build a nest by chewing bark into a paste. In a process still employed today, just like the wasps, Cai Lun pulped the bark of mulberry and sandalwood trees in water and then let it dry, giving birth to paper.
Cai Lun has been regarded ever since as one of maybe the 10 most influential people in world history because of the significance of his invention.
Think about it for a moment. Think of a world without paper.
Prior to paper, things had to be written down on stone.
which was cumbersome, expensive.
Animal skin, or even bamboo.
It's very difficult to carry a bamboo scroll around with you. On the other hand, paper, it folds easily, it rolls easily, it can be spread out easily, it's easy to use, and it's relatively cheap.
Paper revolutionized China.
Like the internet today, the invention of paper is really significant because it made literature, religion, information accessible to the ordinary people.
As a result, the knowledge acquisition and retention in China takes such a quantum leap forward that the West can't catch up for something like 1400 years.
China's great intellectual leap was aided by another homegrown innovation.
When you get through to the Tang Dynasty in the 7th century, you get another quantum leap forward, which is the invention of woodblock printing.
Early woodblock printing is basically you get a sheet of wood and you carve some kind of text and you have a single sheet representing a whole page, and then you put ink on it and you stamp it.
You can block print that onto as many pages as you like.
The dissemination of ideas is now mechanized and cheap and easy to reproduce.
For the first time, there was a way to mass produce and share another game changer.
The first known printed book, the Diamond Sutra, comes from China. It's a religious textbook talking about a conversation between Buddha and a disciple.
What the invention of the book did was revolutionize society in that we were able to share information with each other, document our histories, tell our stories, communicate with one another.
It created an explosion of books that has never really stopped.
The world would not have access to major classics, the Bible,
The Quran, the Torah, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the I Ching, it just goes on and on and on. All those wonderful stories.
Even today, in our digital age, 3 billion books are published each year in the US alone. Printing revolutionized China, and then the rest of the world.
The technology was taken by merchants to Central Asia and then to Europe.
In the West, it literally changed the course of Western civilization. When Gutenberg made the printing press with movable type, within just a few years, millions of printed sheets of paper were circulating in the form of books throughout Europe.
Without printing, we would not have experienced the Renaissance in the West. During the Renaissance, people became more widely read and became literate for the first time in European history.
If you didn't have paper and you didn't have printing, forget the modern world. It's not going to happen. We're not going to have the literacy we have. We wouldn't have the science we have.
But Chinese paper revolutionized the world in other ways. In the 8th century, it started to make the world go around as well.
They also start using paper for money. Up to that point, money had been in coin form.
Usually made of copper or silver or gold, but it's heavy, it's bulky, it's difficult.
If you want to buy a house, you're carrying around bags of coins, potentially wheelbarrows full.
As commerce in China boomed, merchants began printing easily carried IOUs that could be redeemed in major cities for coins. Then in the early 11th century, the Chinese government took over the production of paper money.
The government would print notes eventually complete with serial numbers in a way that would look very modern to us, long before paper money was thought of anywhere else. And what an impact that's had on world history.
Paper currency has played a huge role in transforming trade and financial transactions. It has become much easier to carry out transactions using paper money.
In time, China's financial game changer was adopted by nations all over the world. Today, there are 180 different global currencies traded on open markets. And even in our increasingly cashless society, there are almost 40 billion US bills currently in circulation. That's enough to fill 4 million briefcases. And after creating paper money, the Chinese invented a way for us to be quickly parted from it.
The Chinese also lay claim to the invention of playing cards.
The Chinese use paper for all sorts of things.
Paper is the world's great container. You can bend it around almost any shape of anything you can move. You can mail things in it. You can package things in it. You can put your lunch in it.
Of course, you've got wrapping paper, breakfast cereal.
Without paper, we wouldn't have wallpaper, we wouldn't have diaries, we wouldn't have love letters.
Paper is used in newspapers, magazines, cigarettes, and maps. Even today, almost all ships rely on paper charts to safely complete their voyages. Paper's also the key component in a product that millions reach for every day: toilet paper. First used in China's imperial court in the 6th century, in time it spread to bathrooms all over the world. Today, 30.6 billion rolls a year are produced. That's more than enough to stretch the 146 million miles to the sun and back.
I prefer a world that has toilet paper in it.
But as our thought experiment begins, it's all going to disappear. As paper goes, so do maps and charts.
Captain?
Across the planet, marine traffic grinds to a halt.
Cut the engines.
As crews struggle to get their bearings without a map. And wallets get a little lighter as well.
If we had no printing and no paper suddenly, it would be utter chaos for the world. We'd have no money.
The absence of paper would be a total catastrophe.
We would be thrown back into almost a stone age of existence.
With paper now a thing of the past, we'll set our sights on another Chinese invention, one that truly shook the world. We've begun a unique thought experiment designed to examine China's contributions to world history. The removal of paper has disrupted global trade, commerce, and jeopardized the lives of a ship's crew struggling to cross the Pacific.
Captain, I think I got it.
As paper charts and maps vanished, the captain must rely on GPS and satellite phones to get his bearings. But as we're about to see, as we set our sights on another Chinese innovation, those are about to go too. Gunpowder. Its accidental discovery blasted China, then the entire planet, into another era.
There really are only two eras in the history of warfare: before gunpowder and after gunpowder.
In the 9th century, Chinese chemists were looking to unlock the secrets of eternal life.
Gunpowder arose because alchemists were trying to produce something that would help them find the fountain of youth, to stay alive forever.
They accidentally discover an elixir of death.
They learned that when a mixture of saltpeter, sulfur, and charcoal is ignited, something incredible occurred.
Legend has it, they accidentally blow themselves up. They burn their hands, they burn their faces, houses burn down. Gunpowder is a way of releasing this energy contained in these chemicals really quickly, and it creates an awful lot of energy.
They quickly put their discovery to military use.
What you can do with it is you can stick it in a tube and shoot projectiles out of it.
War was traditionally hand-to-hand combat. You could literally see the person you're killing in a war. With the coming of gunpowder, you don't have to see the enemy anymore.
We have clear evidence by the 900s they were building bombs, they were building grenades, they were building mines, they had catapults that fired explosive devices, and they used gunpowder weapons extensively.
The Chinese guarded the secret of gunpowder. But in the 13th century, it got out.
The West perfected gunpowder in the form of cannonballs, where you could have gigantic projectiles hurled over long distances.
Massive new cannons built by Europeans smashed through castle walls, ending centuries of siege warfare, ushering in a new age of battle.
With the introduction of gunpowder, everything changes. The nature of war became totally different.
It also created a new type of soldier, one that remade the world: the rifleman. Armed with pistols and muskets, then automatic rifles and machine guns, these soldiers used this deadly new technology to control much of the world.
Gunpowder was arguably the most important military technology, military innovation, until the nuclear weapon.
But gunpowder brought more than just death and destruction. It paved the way for other explosives that reshaped our planet.
Without gunpowder, we wouldn't have many of the great civil engineering marvels of the world. It's allowed us to basically master the Earth in a way that would not have been possible.
When we build dams and tunnels, how do we carve these gigantic objects out of solid rock? How do you move mountains?
It helped blast the railroad through the wilds of North America and carved out the Suez and Panama Canals, arteries which fundamentally altered global commerce and travel. Gunpowder brought people together in other ways as well.
The Chinese were first to come to fireworks.
Fireworks, it's really another name for celebration for the world, not just for China.
Can you imagine New Year's Eve around the world without fireworks, without gunpowder, right? It's hard to imagine.
4th of July without fireworks is like the 4th of July without hot dogs.
Gunpowder also played a key role in an invention that took humanity to new and undreamed of heights.
Rocket technology begins with this original Chinese idea of rockets as entertainment. Attaching some exploding device to a stick and then lighting it and watching it shoot up into the sky.
Without gunpowder, we would not have been able to advance to exploring space.
Gunpowder-propelled rockets helped pave the way for the modern behemoths that took humanity into space and deliver a device that makes much of the modern world possible: the satellite. Following the Soviet Union's successful launch of Sputnik in 1957, almost 2,000 operational satellites now orbit the Earth. 24 of them are also the secret behind GPS, the global positioning system that pinpoints locations with incredible accuracy within seconds, which is a good thing for our ship's crew trying to make their way across the Pacific. With their maps and charts gone, they've turned to GPS to help them safely navigate the 10,000-kilometer voyage to North America. But they are about to lose a vital lifeline as we pull the plug on gunpowder-inspired rockets and their most important payload, satellites. As satellites shut down, our ship's crew lose a key navigational tool.
The GPS is out.
Without satellites, global communications start to break down. First responders across the planet struggle to get to emergencies on time. Unable to track planes, global aviation is grounded. At sea, already without maps, ship captains have no idea where they are, but they're facing another problem as well. With the world's 95 weather satellites out of commission, crews across the globe have no idea what they're sailing into. To explore China's massive contributions to history, we've taken away two of its most important innovations: paper and gunpowder. Their disappearance has paralyzed global transportation and commerce and put the life of this captain and his crew into real peril. Thankfully, they have one Chinese invention left to help them find their way across a stormy Pacific:
Heading 250!
the compass. Today, every compass found on a ship's bridge or airplane's flight deck, or carried by a hiker or soldier, owes its existence to an ancient Chinese discovery. 2,200 years ago, the Chinese began exploring the seemingly magical properties of a lodestone, a naturally occurring magnet that spins to find magnetic north when suspended. It was originally used by some to tell the future. In the 11th century, Chinese navigators made a discovery that changed exploration forever.
The Chinese discovered pretty quickly that a metal needle that had been magnetized would orient itself to the poles. They could tell north from south.
Somebody pretty quickly worked out that if we know where it's pointing, then we know where we want to go. We can calculate this pretty quickly.
The discovery of the compass revolutionized sailing.
Before the compass, you have to navigate by the stars. It only works during the night, and it only works on clear nights.
Once you've got a compass, any time of the day or night, you know in which direction you're going.
The compass, which opened up the seas to navigation and the age of exploration.
It also played a key role in the story of one of China's greatest mariners.
The great Admiral Zheng He led the imperial fleet of China during the Ming Dynasty.
They constructed one of the largest fleets known to humanity.
But the compass wasn't the only new innovation on his ships.
The invention of the rudder put Chinese ships ahead of what we see in other parts of the world at the time.
They had rudders built into the superstructure of the ship, with the wheelhouse.
Today, every ship at sea relies on this Chinese invention for navigation.
They also developed the bulkhead, which is an airtight compartment by which a ship stays afloat. Having an airtight compartment not only helps keep your boat afloat, but it helps contain any damage.
Every modern ship is now built with bulkheads. They provide structural rigidity and create watertight compartments that can contain water in case of a hull breach.
As long as you can seal off one portion of the ship, you can survive having major damage to one part of your ship. Otherwise, you're dead.
Equipped with these Chinese innovations, Zheng He made history, taking the fleet across the Indian Ocean, up the Persian Gulf, all the way to Africa, hundreds of years before European explorers.
As soon as other mariners in the Indian Ocean and around Southeast Asia became aware of this Chinese invention of the compass, it rapidly diffused. It was copied and built into ships very, very quickly.
Eventually, the compass reached Europe, and in the 15th century, helped launch a series of voyages that shaped history.
All of these great voyages of exploration depended upon the compass. Would Columbus have got to the Americas without the compass? Would the Portuguese have rounded the Cape of Good Hope and discovered India without the compass? Would Captain Cook have made it to Australia without the compass?
Without China, the great explorers of the past may never have set sail, in which case the progress of civilization would have been totally stunted and world exploration would never have taken place.
But China impacted global exploration in another key way. Many of those voyages were launched for one reason: to find a quicker way to get to China's wealth.
China served as a goal, as this pot of gold at the end of the rainbow for so many centuries of exploration.
For many of those explorers, that pot of gold was filled with China's most valuable export and closely guarded secret. The product of this industrious insect's hard work? The world's most exquisite and valuable fabric: silk. According to legend, it all began 6,000 years ago. The young Empress Lei Tzuo was in her courtyard enjoying a cup of tea under a mulberry tree when a cocoon fell into her cup. As she pulled the cocoon out, it unraveled, revealing a gorgeous shimmering strand that would change the world. While it's probably just a story, the reality's even more incredible. Silk is made by certain moth larvae as they build a cocoon. In time, the Chinese learned how to harvest the silk from these cocoons and weave it into incredible textiles. But it wasn't easy. Each cocoon is made from a single continuous strand that can be as long as 1 kilometer. And it took almost 2,000 cocoons to make just one traditional garment.
I think silk is an incredible superpower fabric. It's strong, it's resilient, it looks beautiful.
At first, silk was reserved solely for the Chinese emperors, but in time it became one of the most coveted objects on the planet.
Kings and queens would kill to get access to this fabric that was impossible to create in the West.
Demand for this wonder substance helped create one of the most important trade routes in history: the Silk Road.
The Silk Roads were the largest and most important commercial and cultural exchange network of the pre-modern world.
The Silk Road helped to give rise to global trade, such that China became a major trading power.
6,400 kilometers long, it connected China with India, Africa, and ancient Rome. But the Silk Road gave the world much more than a luxurious fabric.
Not surprisingly, once these civilizations were connected through trade, all sorts of ideas and ideologies started flowing along the trade routes as well.
Scientific developments, astronomy, religions, philosophy, it was the crossroads of the world.
The first information highway whereby technology could spread from one part of the world to another part. Things like gunpowder, the compass, would slowly spread out of China and then revolutionize history in Europe.
As silk flowed west and gold and silver poured into China, exporters fiercely guarded the secret behind silk's creation.
Since the time of the Roman Empire, Europeans have been trying to figure out how the Chinese produced silk.
The Chinese realized they had a monopoly on this high-value export. So to protect the monopoly, they said, we need to make sure that none of the caravans that are leaving our country can be carrying the silkworm. And we understand that anyone found with silkworms or silk cocoons on their person were then subject to execution.
But eventually, the secrets of silk unwound.
Many years later, they were able to smuggle a few of the worms out, and then you started to get a Roman tradition of making silk, but that took hundreds of years.
Although it's now made in countries all over the world, China remains the top producer, still providing almost 70% of the world's silk. Today, silk remains a top luxury item, loved by designers, fashionistas, and everyday people across the planet.
Silk lingerie. Imagine a world without silk lingerie.
It is used in rugs, bedding, parachutes, bicycle tires, medical sutures, and prosthetic arteries. But now, silk.
Check the compass! Yes, sir!
And the compass, the device that helped spread it across the world, are going to disappear. At sea, the loss of the compass and the rudder
I lost control!
would have a terrifying impact on captains already struggling in a world without maps or GPS.
Give me engineering!
Unable to steer or plot a course, dozens of ships would run aground or go down. Thousands more would sail blind, unable to get their crews or vital cargo to shore. As oil tankers failed to show, gas prices would spike.
There would be a huge surge in unemployment. Factories would shut down. This would be disastrous for the world.
But it's about to get even worse as we prepare to remove China's massive contributions to global cuisine. Chinese innovations like the rudder and compass helped to make the modern world and led to today's global shipping routes. As we've seen, removing these game changers has led to pandemonium on the high seas and confusion at the gas pumps. Now we'll set our sights on another gift from China: food. Every day, roughly half the planet sits down to enjoy a simple but essential tiny grain.
Rice is a critical food staple to people around the world.
Literally billions of people depend on rice today.
In fact, it's estimated that almost half the planet's population relies on rice for the majority of their daily calories. A relative of grass and bamboo, today 40,000 different strains are grown on every continent except Antarctica, and all of them owe their origin to one place.
Along the great Yangtze River and its tributaries, rice was growing in the wild. So rice was domesticated pretty early on there.
Thousands of years ago, China pioneered incredible ways to cultivate it.
The efficiency of early Chinese farmers in being able to create huge paddy fields, to turn hills and mountains into essentially sort of vertical rice paddies.
It's a discovery that transformed the nation.
Rice was a critical component in the development of civilization in the Far East. Rice was nutritionally dense enough that it could feed more people than other grains, which freed up their time to take on other jobs, to specialize, to innovate, to defend the nation, to have a growing economy.
In time, China's agricultural innovations spread through Asia and then onto the rest of the world.
If we didn't have rice today, there would be massive problems feeding the world.
But rice isn't China's only contribution to our kitchens.
All of the citrus fruit come from South China. So every orange, lemon, lime, grapefruit, you name it, they all originate in China. You have a bowl of noodles, that comes from China.
First enjoyed over 4,000 years ago, the noodle was originally cooked for royalty before it was carried out along the Silk Road onto tables all over the world.
Can you imagine Italian cuisine without pasta?
China also created the single most consumed product on the planet. Each day, over 2 billion people around the world will enjoy a cup of tea. It's believed the Chinese steeped their first brew over 2,000 years ago.
The Emperor Shennong is considered the father of tea. He was sitting under a tea tree one day with a cup of hot water, and a tea leaf blows in, and he sees the concoction, and he takes a sip, and he recognizes the properties of tea.
It began as a somewhat mysterious drink with very healthy medicinal properties that people would take for energy, and then it became just a widespread social drink that had profound implications for China.
And tea quickly became an important part of daily life.
Tea requires boiled water, and with boiled water comes sanitization.
It kills the bacteria that might otherwise kill you. Tea changes everything it touches.
By the mid-1800s, England had gone mad for it as well.
Tea was a commodity that Europe wanted and had no way of getting except from China.
The British were desperate to break China's monopoly on tea and crack the carefully guarded secret of its production.
You can't just grab a tea leaf, throw it in hot water, and you'll have tea. It is a highly processed product.
To do it, they attempted the robbery of the century.
A man named Robert Fortune, he is a botanist, a naturalist, and his job is to go in, steal tea plants, tea seeds, and tea makers, and the recipe for tea.
He pulled it off, smuggling thousands of seedlings and a handful of Chinese tea farmers over the border into British-controlled India. There, plantations were established that exist to this day.
Can you imagine the impact of the English if they lost their tea? I don't know how my mother would cope without tea.
But China's contributions don't end there. After giving the world one of its favorite beverages, Chinese porcelain changed how we drank it as well.
I mean, the reason we call fine porcelain China is because that's where it was coming from. China was the place that produced all of the best stuff.
The Chinese were essentially 1,000 years ahead of the West in terms of creating porcelain.
Using a special clay called kaolin and kilns that burned much hotter than European counterparts, Chinese potters made objects unlike any seen on Earth before. According to legend, Marco Polo brought the first piece back to Europe in the 14th century. He named it porcellana after its resemblance to a white shell that looked like the belly of a baby pig, porcellini in Italian. For the next 400 years, it became one of the most prized items on the continent.
Essentially, porcelain plates, porcelain bowls to serve their guests became a marker of status, of your success, of your wealth. And we still say today, of course, bring out the best Chinaware when important guests are coming.
But porcelain isn't just found in our china cabinets. Because of its low rate of conductivity, billions of porcelain insulators keep power lines safe in over 100 countries. For centuries, tea has provided humanity with a simple pleasure during difficult times.
What is more communal and comforting than tea?
But now, as our thought experiment continues, we're taking it away. And while the loss of high tea may not be considered a disaster, the loss of China's greatest gift to the dinner table certainly is.
I can't imagine a world without rice. What would a third of the world's population do today without rice as their main food source?
And as porcelain goes, so do power grids on several continents, plunging hundreds of millions of hungry people into darkness. And it's only going to get more dangerous as we move on to China's contributions to medicine. The removal of key Chinese inventions has brought the modern world to a standstill. Without paper maps, GPS, and compasses to guide them, thousands of cargo ships are lost at sea, unable to get to port. As oil and gas supplies run out, global industry is starting to collapse. And with Chinese contributions to our dinner tables now gone, millions face starvation as well. At least for now, people can turn to another gift from China for help in these difficult times.
Chinese medicine is based upon over 2,500 years of observation of the human body in the world.
It's not about treating a single symptom. It's about trying to understand how all of the body operates together. It's trying to understand the flows, the energies.
Traditional Chinese medicine depends on the positive flow of qi, of energy, of a life force. When qi flows freely, there is health. When qi is blocked, when there's stagnation in the body, there is sickness.
After a diagnosis, traditional Chinese doctors often turn to nature for a cure.
Whatever illness we suffer, nature can heal us. Herbs, even tree leaves.
The Chinese were masters of herbal medicine. They thought that among the bounty of plants were medicines, and they would spend centuries trying to find ingredients which could allow them to cure certain diseases.
I go to see a Chinese herbal doctor, and he evaluates me, considers it, and then puts together a concoction of like leaves and grains and seeds and whatnot until it looks like kind of a forest. And you boil things and you make soup. And it's very pungent, very bitter, very unusual. Invariably, it does help through a sickness.
Over the centuries, the Chinese developed another way to restore balance.
Acupuncture believes that there is energy flowing through the body, and it flows along certain meridians. When your energy gets stuck and stagnates, if you poke the meridian, if you stimulate that meridian, you can help shake loose that stuck qi so that it flows freely. I believe in traditional Chinese medicine because it's worked for me. It is cheaper, it is less invasive, and less destructive. It has fewer side effects.
And I think it will play a huge role in the decades and centuries to come.
But Chinese medicine has done more than just restore balance. It helps treat one of the world's biggest killers, malaria. Spread by mosquitoes, this disease afflicts 103 countries and over 3.3 billion people. And unfortunately, it hits children under 5 the hardest. Ironically, the treatment that brought peace to so many with the disease was born in a time of conflict. In the late 1960s, communist forces in nearby Vietnam were locked in a brutal war with the US. As the fighting raged, Vietnamese soldiers faced 2 enemies, US troops and malaria. While thousands of his men fell to the disease, Vietnamese leader Ho Chi Minh reached out to a fellow communist to find a cure, China's Mao Zedong. The job of creating a cure fell to Chinese doctor Tu Youyou. Although trained in modern medicine, she turned to traditional sources to find the answer.
Tu Youyou, by looking at the old records of ancient herbal medicine by the thousands, by testing them, by using Western scientific methods, she was able to, bingo, find chemicals that were active against malaria.
Having found a possible cure, she took an incredible, brave step and tested it on herself.
That's a righteous woman, brave, amazing woman, a woman who put her life and her body on the line.
Fortunately for her and the world, the treatment worked. And to this day, her discovery continues to be used all over the world and has saved millions of lives. It also won her the Nobel Prize. But China has done more than just keep our bodies healthy. It made them strong as well, turning some into lethal weapons. An ancient art form developed over many dynasties, Kung Fu was created for self-defense, exercise, and to promote harmony within the body.
Our body has its own energy system. If you harness them, making sure yin and yang are in balance, then you can not only enhance your own health, you can protect yourself as well.
And while popular within China for centuries, one unforgettable star introduced it to the world in the 1960s, Bruce Lee.
Bruce Lee was a radical human being. He was fierce and amazing. He's gorgeous, sexy. I used to love Bruce Lee so much that I would try to pass off and tell people that I was related to him because we both have the same last name, which was cool.
Although he died at the age of 32 after completing just a handful of films, he changed Western cinema forever.
Without Chinese cinema, we wouldn't have The Matrix, we wouldn't have all the sort of spectacle films.
Lee also paved the way for future stars like Jet Li and Jackie Chan, whose own films have grossed over $1.7 billion. For centuries, Chinese martial arts and traditional medicines have helped millions lead healthier, happier lives. But now, that's about to change. Their disappearance could have terrible consequences for this one family as our thought experiment continues. The loss of 2 yo-yo's anti-malarial drugs would hit the world the hardest. Without them, local economies would crash as millions would be too sick to work. Even worse, countless young children infected with malaria are now in for the fight of their lives. The world has been rocked by the disappearance of China's key innovations.
If China was erased from the world today, it would be pandemonium.
At sea, thousands of ships, unable to get to land, languish with their cargo. On land, shelves are emptied as new food from around the world and high-tech goods from China don't arrive.
It would be an economic earthquake. Very rapidly, the warehouses would empty, the prices would skyrocket. I don't know what people would do, frankly.
Without porcelain insulators, power grids around the world have failed, plunging much of the planet into darkness. And in many of the poorest nations, millions of children are left defenseless against malaria. But thankfully, the time to end our experiment and put everything back to normal has come.
Captain, the GPS is back.
As we do, GPS satellites and satellite phones come back online, providing thousands of stranded crews with a digital lifeline and finally a way home.
Full speed ahead.
Copy that, Captain.
Across the world, power grids return to normal, as do countless kitchens, as China's gifts to our tables are restored. And once again, doctors have a powerful weapon in the fight against malaria. Millions will now survive. Our experiment has come to an end. What does the future for China hold?
China on the modern world stage is only going to play a much more important role in the years to come.
With booming trade and a government-controlled economy, China is building the new global Silk Road.
The Chinese also remember the age when the Silk Road dominated world. And the Chinese government have a policy now to rebuild a land and ocean Silk Road. They're pushing hard to develop the railways and communication routes through Central Asia.
It's really a large-scale infrastructure development project through Central Asia. It's also a maritime infrastructure development with new ports in parts of India, Pakistan, and so on.
Once completed, a network of roads, rail lines, and shipping routes will link over 68 countries, representing roughly 65% of the world's population. And to power this new economic engine, China will turn to new sources as well.
China today is hungry. They want to make up for the centuries of lost progress, and they want to catch up as soon as possible, and that means energy.
China is developing wind energy, solar energy, hydropower, and other types of renewable energy, and it's far ahead of other nations in this capacity.
China will also push other scientific frontiers. After helping to make the rocket possible, China is poised to launch a new space race.
They're looking to space. The Chinese space program may be behind now, but they know the future lies in space, and they're pushing hard on that front.
I think it's going to force the West to reinvest in space. It will create a new space race, and it will drive technology and innovation forward.
China right now is poised to retake the mantle of the world's greatest superpower, like it was 1,000 years ago.